One of the big questions you should have about your reserve fund is it enough? Every year, you should have a clear understanding of your reserve fund strength. It may look like a lot of money, but remember, it's measured against the needs of your association, and owning and maintaining real estate is expensive. Think of your reserve fund strength as a fuel gauge for your journey into the future. Are you starting out the year with a full tank, an empty tank, or somewhere in between? Fortunately, National Reserve Study Standards provide a standardized calculation for seeing how well your reserve fund fits the needs of your association at this time. But what is this standard calculation? And does it reliably report your starting reserve fund strength? The good news is that not only does this calculation work, it has an extra benefit. It also reveals your risk for an upcoming special assessment. Follow along and see for yourself. Let's now turn the corner to the first topic, calculating your reserve fund strength. It's not just looking at cash in the bank that appears on your bank statement or balance sheet. It's all about gaining meaning about if the cash balance you have is a lot or a little compared to the needs of your components at this time. So let me turn the microphone over to Mark Bradley, who at this time will guide you through this topic. Mark.
Hey, thank you very much, Robert. Very glad to be here. Very glad to be here with all these wonderful owners and managers and board members helping us get through the Reserve Studies 102. Let's just take a look at this photo. Looks like a newer association, and we can already see what kind of components that they're going to be looking at. We've got a courtyard. We've got to resurface the pool. We're painting and eventually replacing this trellis. We've got balconies that need caring for. And that's just one picture that you can see. And if you're a board member or you're a manager at this association, the choices you make about funding reserves will determine if you're able to stay on top of this deterioration or if this deterioration is going to get the better hand and you'll begin to fight roof leaks. You have paint becoming faded and stained. You're talking about big repairs in the pool area or maybe your rec room, and they stop becoming an inviting area. And the property value, the curb appeal of the property starts to lag the market. So let's just start out our journey to the future by understanding our starting point, calculating how much you should have in your reserve fund at this point in time based on the condition of all the components in your component list. The financial analysis starts with the component list. This outlines the cost and the timing of the projects in the future. This is a pretty simplified component list, but it's good for our example today. This shows a basic description of the component of the project, the useful life cycle, that's how long this should last, and the number of years remaining before it's got to get repaired or replaced, and current today's cost. This list at your association should be assembled based on the National Reserve Study Standards 3-part test, which is shown here. If you're not familiar with this concept, go back and watch 101. We'll explain it all in a little more detail there, and I'll make sure that there's a link to that program in the outline. So, question is, how much cash in our reserve fund is enough? Again, talking about National Reserve Study Standards to find a solution. That solution gives us a reliable calculation that works for all types of associations. We're not talking about a dollar per unit or a percent of the unit value or even just a straight cash number. This is a calculation. It compares your current reserve fund balance to your association's needs, telling you how well that reserve balance fits the needs of the association assets. Let's do an example. First, the component from that sample component list we just showed, pool furniture replacement. This one's pretty straightforward and simple. It has a 5-year useful life, remaining useful life of 0. That means that it's time to be replaced. Time's up. Current replacement cost is $4,600. If you're a board member, you need to buy new pool furniture. How much would you want to see in reserves? $4,600. That's right. When the remaining useful life is 0, it's time to have the money on hand. And that's how much you should have in your reserve fund for this component. Well, let's just do another example. Let's say it's the pool. Pool needs to be resurfaced every 10 years. Currently has a remaining useful life of 5. That means you have 5 years until you have to do that resurface. So the life is halfway used up. That $10,000 cost you don't need right now because the expense is still 5 years away. With a current replacement cost estimate of $10,000 and the life is halfway used up, we understand now how much cash we think would be good for the association to have at this time. You've probably guessed it's about half, $5,000. It's a good amount for this association to have set aside now that the component is halfway used up. Okay, so let's put some graphics for those of us like me who learn a little bit better through pictures than numbers. We'll walk through this. Ignoring interest in inflation. A reserve study is going to have interest in inflation on it, but for simplicity's sake, we're going to put that aside. At 5 years old, you'd like to have half of the $10,000 set aside, right? So in the next year, we want to have $6,000 set aside, and then 7, and then 8, and then 9, and then finally, when the resurfaces it down to a 0 remaining useful life, we need to have that $10,000 ready to go to spend on the pool resurfacing. And then, once we've done the resurfacing, the life of the pool resets. So in the 11th year, after you spent the money, you only need to have $1,000 in reserves, and you start the cycle all over again. So we've shown that the reserve needs at your association go up and then down over the years, depending on the timing of your reserves projects. Your needs are not the total cost of your reserve components now. Due to inflation, your reserve needs will generally trend upwards, but you understand that it'll go up and down. There will be up years as you get big projects, and then down years when you accomplish big projects. So that's a pretty simple calculation done by your reserve study provider in your reserve study. Just the fractional age of every component multiplied by the current cost. Total of all those individual calculations is called the fully funded balance. Let's take a look at what that looks like. So right here, I put in another column on the component list table over on the right. The fully funded balance column. That's the calculation of the current reserve needs of the association. The highlighted row shows what we did for pool furniture. Since it's fully deteriorated, you need the full amount in reserves. Now, same is true for the pool resurface. When a $10,000 project is halfway deteriorated, the fully funded balance is $5,000. Pretty straightforward math here. When you add them all together, you get the fully funded balance total for the property. This year, remember, this calculation is going to change each year. The fully funded balance is $154,100. That's the amount of deterioration at the association this year. That's the ideal amount to have in reserves. If you had that much in reserves, you would feel good. Okay, so let's talk about connecting this calculated target to your actual reserve balance. Okay, once we have a target, you can compare your reserve fund to that target. You have an ideal and you have reality, and gain meaning from comparing those two. As you can see in the graphic, we're balancing them. How does your cash compare to the needs of your association? That's what tells you if your reserves are strong, fair, or weak. That's another calculation that's done in your reserve study, and that comparison between your current cash and your fully funded balance is called the percent funded. All right, let's go back to this component list. A fully funded balance of $154,000. If you had $308,000 in reserves, you've learned that your reserve fund is twice as big as your current amount of deterioration, meaning 200% funded. On the other hand, if you only have $77,000 in reserve, you know now that you are 50% funded. You now have a point of comparison to learn if your reserve fund is bigger than or smaller than this important comparison point. Okay, but what does that mean to you? Now we're getting into the answer of how we can learn if your reserves are strong, fair, or weak. It's all about your percent funded, which is a good indicator of special assessment risk, meaning how often do associations who don't have enough cash to do their reserve projects run into a special assessment? That's what you want to know, and that's what percent funded tells you. It's a powerful risk indicator. Just like with your own health, you care about things like your weight, cholesterol, blood pressure. These are all things that factor into your risk. When your percent funded is low, so the left side of the chart in red, for those in the 0 to 30% funded range, you have around a 50% chance of needing a special assessment to pay for your scheduled reserve projects because you simply don't have enough money on hand. You don't have enough. On the right, in the green range, for associations at or above 70% funded, special assessments are rare. That means associations above 70% have enough. They have enough reserves to do their projects on time. That board can feel comfortable that the reserves are strong. Now we have to figure out, where is your association? Again, percent funded should be a number calculated in your reserve study, like a grade in school. It's nice to score near 100%. Now, the metaphor is not perfect because unlike in school, a score of 75% is still pretty good. Unlike a perfect score of 100 at school, there's also plenty of association with a percent funded that actually goes above 100%. So first homework assignment after today's webinar is to go check your latest reserve study. Find out your percent funded. Find out what range you're in. Are you in the 0 to 30% or the weak range? or the 30% to 70% fair range, or above 70% strong range. This is not about your cash balance. It's about your fit. It's about how well the cash you have on hand fits the needs of your association at this current time. It's important for the board and the owners, and knowing the reserve fund strength also helps managers understand the pressures the association's feeling. And importantly, outside parties like real estate agents, lending agents can learn if the association is prepared for the future or if a new owner is going to be needing to face a special assessment in the near future. Okay, so this is a national profile of reserve fund strength. Many people tend to be surprised when they see this. Maybe they think that there should be more associations in the strong range, or maybe they're surprised of how many associations are in the weak range. But these are the numbers. 34% of associations are in the weak range. 40% enter into the fair range, where special assessments are pretty infrequent. And then the final 26% are in the strong range, where special assessments are very rare. The point I'll make in the next section is, now that you know where your association stands, let's create a multi-year plan to make sure you have enough cash to pay your bills. And for many of us, getting on a plan to gradually strengthen our reserve fund and lowering the chance of a special assessment at your association.
At Association Reserves, we make the present less stressful and the future more secure. If you want to join us in this mission, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Leave a comment down below on what you'd like to see us address in a future video. Let's plan for your best future.